Welcome, everyone. If members would find their new seats, we'll begin in a minute, please. We have a much to discuss, Dr. Blair. Much to discuss. Without kids this summer, I don't know what you're going to do. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We have much to do, and I think we are organized enough to do it. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would the members please rise for a moment of silence, followed by Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Sixteen present.
Thank you. Do we have anybody participating remotely? Do we know if a member is trying to participate and cannot? No? Okay. This looks different. For those of you in the front row, see Jody after the meeting. Judge Hoos, she's got some extra. She has some extra homework for you. A little assignment. I will not, 500 times. Welcome back after an extended away time from one another. I'm not sure what word you used there. It wasn't really a sabbatical, and it wasn't really a vacation. In the course of the many months since we've last met in person, much has happened. I appreciate the labor of the team here at the county, in particular Scott's group in IT, for figuring out how to teach a bunch of upper middle-aged folks how to all communicate through a new utility that I don't really know I'd ever heard of before we started using it. And now I've learned about so many others. People say, oh, WebEx is better than Teams, and you got to hit Zoom. So we learned, and we're back. There are a lot of milestones that were accomplished while we were gone, and I think tonight we've got a few more to accomplish, but before we begin, I want to ask for Brandy, hi Brandy, Bryant to come up and do tonight's proclamation. I'm going to do it in this order so we can set the stage for this. Scott, is there a rule about wearing your mask while talking or attempting to breathe?
No, we're all pretty well socially distant, Mr. Chairman, so...
Thank you. So, Brandy, if you'll come up. Larry, do we have a spare mic on your side? Scott's going to bring you a mic, Miss Bryant. You're welcome. For those of you at home, this is Brandy Bryant, one of our new members who was you just finished the primary. First place, right? Excellent.
Only place.
Okay. Brandy, feel free to read your proclamation.
Okay. On behalf of the County Board, it is my pleasure to read this proclamation condemning the actions that resulted in George Floyd's death. as a resolution condemning the actions that resulted in George Floyd's death. Whereas on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd, an African-American man, died at the hands of 4 Minneapolis, Minnesota police officers. And whereas one of the officers knelt on Mr. Floyd's neck for at least 4 minutes, I messed that up, for at least 8 minutes, while Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs, lying face down on the street, struggling to breathe, while the other 3 officers failed to respond to Mr. Floyd's pleas for help. And whereas we condemn the actions of the Minneapolis, Minnesota police officers involved, and whereas the actions of these 4 officers do not represent the thousands of men and women that serve and protect their respective communities with the highest levels of professionalism, whereas we extend our condolences to Mr. Floyd's family and friends and to all who grieve his death. And whereas as public officials, it is our duty to foster a community free of fear, intimidation, violence, and provide equal protection of law. And whereas we denounce in the strongest possible terms the actions and inactions of the Minneapolis, Minnesota police officers that resulted in Mr. Floyd's death. Now, therefore, it is hereby proclaimed that the county board, county administrators, Peoria County Sheriff, Peoria County State's Attorney, and all Peoria County employees join with America in its disbelief, sorrow, shame, and anger over the death of George Floyd. And be it further proclaimed that the county board recognizes that we can do better as a country and as a county to confront systematic racism that has brought us to a place of fear and distrust. And be it further proclaimed that the county board supports and endorses peaceful unification throughout the county, the state, and nation, opposing this and similar acts of violence against persons of color, both now and in perpetuity. And be it further proclaimed that the county board commits to our community that our organization does not and will not tolerate nor accept in any way the violent or disrespectful treatment of others that degrades dignity or disregards human life. And be it further proclaimed that the county board commits to our community that it will be deliberate and intentional in its efforts to engage its employees and community in constructive, honest, and substantive dialogue to better understand where racism exists and to adopt policies to abolish it. And be it further proclaimed that the county board and the Peoria County Sheriff are committed to continue to work with and engage the community to improve police policies and police community relations to build trust, save lives, and enact evidence-based reforms. And be it further proclaimed that this proclamation shall be effective immediately upon its adoption, dated this 11th day of June 80, 2020. Signed, Andrew Rand and Rachel Parker.
Thank you, Brandy. Informally, I think to adopt that, can I get a motion to become effective immediately? Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Thank you, Dr. Blair. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, any opposed, same sign. I think you got that as unanimous. Sorry. I didn't want you to stop and reschedule one. Okay. Randy, thank you very much for that. And where'd you go? Oh, I see you. Thank you again. We'll take these minutes all at one time. Could I get a motion to, well, Mr. Clerk, I'll let you go.
Approval of minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenbaum, in a second. Mr. Fennel, thank you, Jim. Any additions or corrections to April 23rd special meeting minutes, May 14th regular session, and May 14th executive session? Any corrections or additions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
on the May 14th meeting, it took me about 5 minutes to get called in, so I think that's why I was put down as absent, but I was able to get called in.
And I recall that. Thank you. I recall you did get on the line. Thank you. And we had just talked as I was coming in the building. Yes. Okay? We can get that?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Anyone else? Brian, that would impact both executive session and regular, correct? Okay.
I believe we had him in there for executive, and for the regular meeting, there's a note that he joined after executive.
However you record that.
Okay.
Okay. Other than that item, anyone else? All those in favor, well, please vote.
$16 ayes. Next, suspension of rules.
Thank you, everyone. Better I walk with a friend skilled in this conversation than talk. So, Mr. Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you'll be voting for in Roman numeral 2 is the suspension of the rules of order of the Peoria County Board. In other words, your own rules. And what you're doing is suspending Article 4, Section 1G, as in golf, which is citizens' remarks. You are all meeting tonight in person, but yet the provision I just cited in your own rules permits citizens to be present physically. That's not something that's being permitted at this time. The citizens have been able to submit by email comments or questions. So what you would be voting on is to suspend the rules relating to that provision of the citizens being able to be present for the county board meeting.
Everyone understand the difference? Thank you, Mr. Alcesser, on the motion and Mr. Dillon on the second. Thank you. Any questions? Thanks for the clarity. All those in, please vote.
$16 ayes.
Doing.
Next, consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Thank you, Ms. Williams and Dr. Blair on the second. Questions? Consent agenda. Seeing none, please vote.
$16 ayes.
There is none, correct.
I apologize. Skipped right over that one.
None was submitted by the cutoff time.
16 ayes on consent. Next, zoning ordinance and resolutions. A resolution from your executive committee recommending approval to place a referendum question on the November 3rd, 2020 general election ballot to sell or dispose of Headington Oaks, a skilled nursing facility owned by the County of Peoria.
Motion to approve Ms. Williams and a second by Mr. Fennel. Discussion? Linda, are you the only one in the very far back?
Don't worry, I'm fine.
Okay, I just need I need you to wear something, a propeller or something. It's the fourth row. Yeah,
Right.
wow. Okay. Any other discussion, Mr. Fennell?
I just think it'd be good if we have a little, for the public, a reasoning why we're doing this, to put it on the ballot because of the fact that it was purchased and built with the funds that were generated through a referendum, and so that we have to go back to the citizens to have a referendum to sell it.
All right, Mr. Sorrell, you want to add a little bit more boots and suspenders on that?
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman. For the benefit of the public and for everyone's memory, on April 23rd of this year, this body voted unanimously to initiate the steps necessary to close Headington Oaks, which is the skilled nursing facility that the county owns and operates. I know the resolution says that at present there's 65% of our residents have voluntarily made accommodations at other facilities to discharge themselves or their loved ones on their behalf have done so from Headington Oaks to another facility in our region. That number could be updated to be over 85% as of now. That's just the movement that we've seen since the committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. But to Mr. Fennell's question reason for asking for the explanation, the voters of Peoria County on 4 separate occasions gave this body and your predecessors permission to either construct a new nursing home facility, and that was Bellwood Nursing Home back in 1966, to levy a property tax for the very first time in 1983, even though it was not until the mid-90s that you actually levied a property tax for the first time. You had the authority to do so starting in 1983. In 2003, the voters gave this body the authority to increase how much you could levy on an annual basis. And then in 2008, with the public facility sales tax, which is more commonly known in our community as the museum tax, does include language in the law that allows county governments to levy such a sales tax. It specifically calls out county-owned nursing homes as a potential use of the proceeds from a public facility sales tax. And all 4 times the voters have granted this body the authority to do those things. State law says that if you've asked the voters even once, and we've asked the voters 4 times for permission to do any one of those things, then the statute says we must ask the voters to, again, if it comes time to sell or dispose of the land and the buildings associated with the county-owned nursing home. And that's what this resolution does tonight. It places on the November 3rd general election ballot a question that will ask the voters to grant this body the permission to do just exactly that. The exact ballot language that, should the resolution be approved, will read as follows. Peoria County has ended its operation of Headington Oaks, the county-owned skilled nursing facility. Shall the County of Peoria be permitted to sell or dispose of the land and buildings known as Headington Oaks? Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sorrell. Mr. Fennell, any more around that? Anyone else want to comment? Correct myself, I meant to say belts and suspenders, not boots. Seeing no more comments, please vote.
Sixteen ayes.
Mr. Elsesser?
I just wondered, did they leave the question mark out on purpose, or do you think it's it looks better without the question mark in there.
Mr. Elsesser, that's a Scrivener's error. The executive committee had initially talked about modifying the language, and we had anticipated a floor amendment this evening to reflect the changed language, but in the end, in conversations with the chairman, we decided to keep the language as is. So the absence of a question mark is a Scrivener's error.
Good eye, Member Elsasser.
I had a really good fifth grade English teacher.
Will your teacher say the same?
Item 2, a resolution from your county health committee recommending approval of budget amendment for Peoria City County Health Department's COVID-19 contract tracing grant.
And Ms. Williams on the motion to approve, and the second from Ms. Pastusha. Thank you. Is Director Hendrickson here? Welcome, Director Hendrickson.
Thank you. Before you, you have a resolution to bring forward for up to $4.9 million for our contact tracing grant. This was an allocation that was awarded to all 102 counties throughout the state. Ours was for 4.9, and the grant will run from June 1st to May 31st. We submitted our budget and are now waiting for the state approval for that. So it can go anywhere up to that value. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I know the Health Committee met just before. Monica, in terms of the per capita comparison in the grant received by your department, would you be able to provide a comparison per capita for other counties of like size?
We weren't ever able to see what all other counties received as a comparison, but this grant was such that the smallest award was roughly $800,000. And to give you some perspective, some of our smaller counties in our state, that is equivalent or exceeds their county budget. Our 4.9, usually we're in step with Tazewell County for some state grants just based on our size. Tazewell was about $2 million less than us. And so it's a sizable amount, and I think a lot of that is based on volume of Peoria City County Health Department, but also the fact that there is aspects about coordination from regionally as part of the Restore Illinois plan, as well as focus on doing outreach and directed testing for vulnerable populations.
So I don't want to let that slip. The Restore Heart of Illinois Peoria plan, which we collectively constructed. Brandy, I don't know if you're listening to this. It could be a reason that we're being recognized for the work.
I think that's definitely part of it. Also, I think a large part of it is because our hospital systems exist, and we've been having a strong relationship and coordinating with them with contact tracing, as well as testing capacities. And so when we're talking about a regional approach, those health departments that are coexist or have the largest health systems, I think there is an additional burden on them, duly noted, and that we're able to do that with this type of funding.
Well, congratulations. I think everybody in this room recognizes, I'm not going to cough, okay, because everybody's going to get weird. I think everybody in this room recognizes, not just from your daily sitcom at 3:30 every day, but from all of the work on nights and weekends that the sub-region that we exist in has metrics of contagion rates as a percentage of the general population, severity of illness. It has numbers in there that are embarrassing related to the health disparity between Caucasians, Latinos versus African Americans. But the management of all of that daily process, including co-coordinating with Woodford and Tazewell, has created quite a brand for the Peoria City County Health Department, which I think we'd all like to say thank you for tonight in public, because we haven't had a chance to do this yet. So on behalf of everyone here and everyone watching for the millionth time, you've been the star. And yes, she's one of the only few epidemiologists at the top of a health department in the state. And she plans on hiring a third one to work with her. Thank you and congratulations, Monica. So on the grant, any other discussions? Please vote.
Sixteen ayes. Next, item 3, a resolution from your County Health Committee recommending the endorsement of the Restore Heart of Illinois implementation plan by the County of Peoria and the Peoria County Board.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and the second, Mr. Fennell. Thank you very much. Ms. Williams, you want to bring us up to date on this? Mr. Sorrell, you can help too.
Yeah, I just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the website and, what's involved with that, self-certifying and such. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Williams. So the endorsement before you tonight is for the Restore Heart of Illinois implementation plan, and a couple of critical pieces of information associated with that. Before the governor had released his plan or any guidance related to how we might restart our local economy, the chairman, the mayor of Peoria, Monica, the city manager, myself, and others recognized a need for our community to be ready to reopen. And so we started drafting what those guidelines might look like and how we might do that. That is heavily weighted on science and the partnerships that you heard Monica just talk about in relationship to our two healthcare systems in our community. An added data point that Monica didn't say is those two healthcare systems serve roughly an 11-county area. So if during COVID-19, if you get sick or positive and sick enough that you need to go to an ICU bed and need to be put on a ventilator, there's a good chance anywhere in that 11-county area you're going to end up at one of the 3 hospitals in our community, or potentially one of the hospitals in the Bloomington-Normal area, because there's a little bit of overlap. And so it was important to that leadership team to identify how might we start to reopen our economy. And what we put together is the document that is attached to the resolution, and that was submitted to the governor and his team the same day that the city of Chicago submitted theirs. What we found subsequently is that while the governor never publicly rejected nor endorsed our plan, we see the DNA of our plan in much of the state's implementation strategies and guidelines for how the state has implemented their plan, which is Restore Illinois, to the point now where the two plans essentially overlap each other. And that is great kudos to the team that helped develop the plan and tried to impress upon the state and IDPH the methodology and the approach, the scientific approach to reopening our economy that we put forth. The plan itself has 4 really key functions. One are those metrics that I talked about. We have similar metrics as the state's plan, but the metrics in our plan are again based on that regional healthcare system. They're also tracking a greater number of healthcare metrics, and we're harder on ourselves in terms of where we think we should be. And to date, the community at large, and the community being really the region, has done a phenomenal job of flattening the curve. Second is guidelines. We established industry-based guidelines that would help provide guidance where the state was silent. And so the overlap is many of the guidelines that we proposed is largely, with some modification, but largely what the state put out. And then where the state is silent, we do have local guidance to help provide input and guidance to our local businesses. Third is compliance. We have the only platform in the region where a business can voluntarily self-certify that they are compliant with the reopening guidelines and that they are doing it safely. And then fourth is timelines. The Heart of Illinois plan provided flexible timelines for moving within the state's phases based on those health data and metrics. And what we've seen since then is that there's a significant amount of overlap with the state's plan. How do we push this out to the community? We created a website called restorehoi.com. It has all the various guidance documents based on industry that you can find on it. It has an about or some FAQ information about Restore HOI. For business owners, it gives you the ability to do that voluntary self-certification. And then for members of the public, it gives you the ability to search by county, anywhere within that 11-county area, or by business type or industry type, any and all of the businesses that have done that voluntary self-certification. I didn't have a chance to look before the meeting today to see what the number was, but last time I checked it was well over 175 businesses, the majority of them in Peoria County, Peoria City, and Tazewell County within the 11-county area, the overwhelming majority of them that have gone through that self-certification process. I would suspect it's well north of 200 businesses now, but I didn't get a chance to see what the number was today. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Ms. Williams, anything else? This has been quite the effort to manage the original concept of having a plan to help people understand what going forward was going to look like. And of course, I'm going back almost 2 months now since we really have had much of a chance to talk about it. But our guidance from the governor's office that's been inserted into the plan, they overlap each other. So we're recommending all the same things consistent with the state's plan. But we have additional guidelines in several other areas that are best practices plus our self-certification, so that if your business wants to tell patrons that you're doing the right thing, you can receive a certificate that you're complying. The enforcement question behind all of this has been the one that has dogged everyone in the state, including our own county. And so to the health department's credit, the idea of self-certifying is a concept that's not new. Businesses that self-inspect all the time are part of regulated systems in many kinds of industries, but the health department does not have the horsepower, nor should it, to get out and inspect every business's compliance here. But if you know of businesses that aren't compliant, you can also report them to us as well. Thank you, Scott. Any other questions on this item? I look forward to support it. Mr. Elsasser, then Mr. Ricker.
Well, I never did get to speak to a live voice or with the governor's office because I started trying to call them a long, long time ago about small businesses. You know, it's an absolute sinful shame that these small businesses had to be shuttered while our big box stores were open, and you had hundreds and hundreds of people in those stores. And so it's just a travesty that went this long. You know, I advocated for a long time to open up the small businesses with restrictions and protocol and guidelines and different things. And I just thank you and Mr. Chairman and Mr. Sorrell and the others that worked on this for, you know, putting it all down on paper and at least trying to get the message out there that it's a serious situation. And, you know, I just heard on the radio the other day that, and I hope it's wrong, that nationally they think that 40% of the small businesses are not going to make it. And, I mean, that is just a national disgrace. And, you know, that they were treated like that. And so thank you for your efforts on this issue.
Thank
I do
you,
have one
Mr.
other question. I just noticed on the map here that Woodford County is included. Now, didn't they open up completely on their own like a month and a half ago, but they still signed on to the plan? Is that right?
Correct. So the Woodford County State's Attorney had made it very clear that he was going to make the local choice to not prosecute any violations of the governor's executive orders. But I think through the work of the chairman and working and talking to the Woodford County chairman, that they I don't know if they've voted to endorse it the way you will be tonight, but they have at the public health level they've been actively working within the framework that is the plan.
Mr. Ricker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure we're clear that this is a good supplemental document to the Restore Illinois plan, so it provides some additional guidance and, you know, and again, recognize those people who put the efforts to it. It does not supersede the Restore Illinois plan. It still uses the Restore Illinois plan in entirety as far as the phase dates and such. I just want to make sure that the public's clear that, because we had some dates originally in this that we were pursuing, and those dates are not in here. This is a supplement, not a supersede, so we still follow the Restore Illinois phase timeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see your eyes, Ms. Relaford? No, you're good. Okay. All right. Seeing no other wiggles or nods, please vote.
Fifteen ayes, 1 nay. Item 4, review of executive session minutes.
Well, there's an old tradition in this room, and you just look at the lawyer on your right to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the recommendation of the State's Attorney's Office that all previously held minutes continue to be held as a need for confidentiality still exists, and to destroy those executive session audio recordings more than 2 years old, except those that relate to pending litigation.
Larry, I thought you had that memorized. It's just in case. This doesn't require a motion or a second to put it on the floor. We just vote, right?
It's usually a motion.
Oh, okay. All right. Mr. Elsasser, Dr. Blair. For the new folks, you just have to do what the lawyer said. We're just voting to follow our counsel's advice. We can give you some more background on precisely what the advice regards if you ever want to know. It's very interesting. Okay, any questions about that? Hearing none, please vote.
16 ayes. Item 5, suspension of rules.
Okay, Mr. Evans again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The suspension of rules at this point relates again to your own rules of order of the Peoria County Board, and you're suspending those certain provisions in Article 5, which is the procedure of the board. And as I believe you're all aware, the procedure is resolutions come from the committees, they're voted on in the committees, and then they're brought before the county board The suspension of rules relates to tonight. You'll be voting to suspend that procedure and undertake a vote on 6 and 7 respectfully without them having previously gone to the committee.
Thank you very much. And we would use a motion to get them on the floor, correct? Okay, so clear as mud. Can I get a motion on the proclamation regarding the emergency declaration for COVID? Thank you, Member Allison. And the second?
Suspension vote first.
All right, we're going to vote to suspend the rules first. Second? Who wants to be? Thank you, Kate. Ms. Bastuccio. All right, we're voting on the rule suspension. Thank you, thank you. All, please vote. Thanks, Mike.
Ayes.
Okay, now we'll proceed taking them one at a time with item 6, the proclamation. Thank you, Miss Allison, in the second. Thank you, Miss Duncan. Any discussion on the effect of that? Anybody need any clarification? Mr. Ricker?
Following along in the packet, are we doing the proclamation or are we doing the resolution extending declaration of emergency due to COVID?
Number 6. It's got both groups of words in it.
Not quite sure what I'm being asked to vote on.
It's the item that the chairman of your board uses to make a declaration that a condition exists here where based on, and I'm sure they can tell you the code, IEMA or something like that. I can find it for you. Gives us, puts us in line for prospective reimbursements for expenditures of funds.
I guess for the purpose of the public, I'd like to have a little summary of that just so the public knows what we're voting on. I don't know if that's a fair ask.
Sure. I don't really think it's any more complicated than what I said. Because of the COVID crisis, a condition exists in Peoria County where by rule we get to make a declaration through your chairman that this emergency is causing us to experience costs and financial damages in excess of our capacity to pay for it. So absent making this declaration, we cannot get subsequent reimbursement from either FEMA or IEMA that may be assigned by the federal government to the state of Illinois for the purpose of reimbursing us local folks.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for, so thank you.
Okie doke. Any other questions? Mr. Elsesser.
So this would have nothing to do with supporting the Restore Illinois program or anything like
No,
that?
no, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. Anyone else? Please vote.
Ayes. Next, item 7, a proclamation asserting an emergency exists in Peoria County due to recent civil unrest.
Thank you. Could I get a motion to put this on the floor, please? Thank you, Mr. Rosenbaum. And the second from Mr. Watkins. Thank you. Mr. Sorrell, would you put a little bit more color on this for Mr. Ricker, please? And Mr. Fennell?
Point of order, I think on that last vote, there was one nay.
Oh, was there? I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sorrell.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you'll see in your packets, and for the benefit of the public, in the days following the tragic killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, we saw several peaceful protests, but we also saw civil unrest in our community. to the point that the county was named by the governor on June 1st in a gubernatorial disaster declaration pursuant to the Illinois Emergency Management Act. That means that there may or may not be funds that could become available for the state and for local governments within the county. This document, should it be approved, the purpose is the same as the prior item. It makes that formal declaration locally, and then allows or permits us, based on the procedures and the requirements in the Illinois Emergency Management Act, to make sure that we are properly eligible for any reimbursements that may come our way or we'd be eligible for as a result of costs incurred from having to respond to any of the more violent protests that we saw and looting that we saw in our community in those first few days. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Just for clarity, Mr. Straw, I think it also puts us in the pre-approved column with ILEAS and the National Guard for support from both the state ISP and the National Guard.
Yes, that is correct. So should the sheriff require additional resources, we are in the queue to be able to access those additional state resources, whether it be the state police or the National Guard through the Illinois Law Enforcement Alarm System, or ILEAS.
Mr. Elsesser.
Scott, when you send this in, I'm assuming you put down hard numbers as far as what's happened in the past, but like you said, if something would come up again in the future, then we would still have access or an opportunity to ask for more. Is that right? Or
Right. So the governor's declaration was made on June 1st. It is valid for 30 days. The chairman signed this on June 3rd, so it is valid for 30 days, which means that any expenses that were incurred during that 30-day period, we would be eligible to request reimbursement for, should the state make funds available. And then once we get to the end of that 30-day period, if the chairman, in consultation with the sheriff and the state's attorney, believes that an emergency still exists and the governor extends or does a new declaration extending the statewide, or at least the state declaration covering specific counties, including our own, still exists, then we would do a second declaration, and this body would need to then come back and ratify that.
Anyone else? Please vote. Oh, Mr. Dillon, I'm sorry. Boy, I don't know if I should give that to you, man. That was late.
It was late, but just for clarification, for the sake, and I know I'd ask Scott, but Jody and Chairman, this replaces the original one we voted on back at the beginning. So this one supersedes, correct? And so that the time frame starts on this one, because the original one we voted on in March had no end date on it, whereas doesn't this supersede it to?
These both went out as one resolution citing two sections of the code, one for the original COVID emergency and all those expenses that are running. You're correct.
Okay.
And the second one is the muscle of the state police supporting our sheriff's department as well as the National Guard. That's a very different kind of approval process.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. These two emergency declarations now have taken the place of our original declaration.
Yes. The first one, item 6, replaces the very original one. The second, item 7, is new based on the events since May 27th in our community regarding civil unrest. Thank you. All right. Ooh, please vote.
Sixteen ayes.
Thank you.
Next, miscellaneous and announcements.
I don't want to ever let anything become miscellaneous. First, I'd like to recognize that Ms. Parker is not with us tonight because of a tragic loss of a child and her family. Also, I'd like to recognize that Coach Booth at Peoria Public Schools administration is in process of grieving for his father, who's passing slowly but gracefully. Both important to the soul of a lot of people in local government in the community, and I would ask everyone to keep them in their thoughts. And I'd like to use the chairman's prerogative to invite someone to go first here under miscellaneous, and the sheriff of Peoria County, a fellow named Brian Asbell, is in the far room. And I've asked him to make some comments about his department's efforts over the last few weeks. And while he comes to the microphone, I just also want to point out that I don't know why Junior is wearing that vest. It's really not that cold in here. So it's very different fashion. It's very different fashion for him. I've seen a lot of his gigs. That's not one of them. Sheriff, welcome.
He looks good, though. Good evening, everybody. Just kind of a brief overview where we're at the sheriff's office here. It's been quite a ride since March with everything, trying to manage a jail and obviously everything that's going on in the street that was really changed after the tragedy in Minnesota, and it's something we're very conscious and aware of. We were really involved a lot with the civil unrest that started on May 31st, and it kind of changed our operations there for at least 3 or 4 days. Primarily, we were assisting Peoria City Police at a pretty large level. We had quite a few resources out on third shift for those first couple nights, really until the state resources that the Guard could come in and help with some of those fixed asset sites. It's really hard to plan for events like this because you have to look at the jail as well for a possible large amount of arrests coming in. So you have to staff properly, and in the meantime still be cognizant that we have a health pandemic and trying to manage that as well. Fortunately, here in the last week and a half, we're able to start some of our services back up at the jail. And that was very important, especially with public visiting on a limited basis, where we're doing it 3 days a week, at least getting some family visits in there. Even though the jail population is down, I mean, we got down at one point below 200, and that's the lowest I've ever seen in my 25 years. But it's historical that we always will have a spike during the summer months. So we're starting to see the increase right now. For the last week, our ADP is right around 240. However, there wasn't summer camp to deal with on Memorial Day, which I was very grateful for. Thank you, Monica. That's usually a big event we have to manage, but it's work intrusive. So even though you have a lower jail population, you still have to, we don't have the ability now to double bunk. So you have to spread your population out, and where you actually have to have more housing units open, which obviously require more FTEs, more staff. And that's kind of the balance that we're trying to figure out every day. We're managing through the cuts too. Currently, we have 11 patrol deputies on furlough, and our corrections staff. So very fortunate with the ones that volunteered for this. They're really kind of helping us, and it's very flexible. And we're going to plan on running that all the way through the end of July. To have enough workforce. But again, I go back and talk about the jail and the population. We've already had to pull some off that furlough status just to have enough staffing. So there's a lot going on in the world. Start with the proclamation that Brandy started with, Ms. Bryant started with tonight, and I think that's a focus on a lot of the work that we're working on right now. Me personally and my command staff, as well as our officers in the field, we're very cognizant of the temperature in the community right now. I do believe, though, we are, this is something that we've been working on for at least 3 years with a lot of the programs and the services that we've started out at the jail, focused on relationships and community reentry, and just having some of those conversations with the detained population has benefited us. Even through this last couple of weeks, it was something that's helped us. So we've got a lot of work to do, though. There's a lot of work, but we're ready to start the healing process. And I know myself and then the state's attorney and the chairman and everyone, we're ready to sit down at any table and see what we can do here at this micro level. We know it's a macro problem, but it's what can we do here locally to start fixing some of these problems, even just with the system itself. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think this would be a really good time if any of the members want to get up close and personal with the sheriff. I can tell you my string of text messages with him extends into all hours of the morning in the last few weeks. So he has been in a car working with others. So this is a real good chance to get up close and personal to a real working sheriff. Mr. Elsasser?
Is it accurate that you never did have one case out at the jail? Is that right? Of COVID case?
As of today, yes.
I mean, that's pretty amazing.
We've had up to 40 on protocol, so we're screening every individual that comes in, and that's actually pushed the population, or at least the housing, out too, because you can't double bunk, but everyone is going to go on a quarantine status before they go to general population. My biggest fear is actually staff coming in and possibly contaminating in an area, but that's something that we look at every day as well too. So we are very grateful. I mean, that's another hero that we seldom talk about, is that correctional healthcare staff that we have at the jail. And they've really been working hard, as well as the mental health staff, because there's been a lot of emotion with the detainee population. I mentioned this getting visiting starting again because they've been shut down. Very fortunate to have that the reentry position start in January, Angel Cruz, where we've modified his work really to help work in a social part with the detainee population. But no, knock on wood, but we haven't had a situation yet.
That's very commendable, and I know when things are going well, you don't want to sit there and rest on your laurels and brag about it. But we're, like you said, we're just very thankful to God that He's protected our jail population. Because
thank you, Mr. Elsesser. Miss Allison, Miss Groves Allison.
I just wanted to ditto thank you for the hours that you've put in, both on the effort you've put into the social programs that you value. We obviously value those as well. And I think the folks you've got working out there and throughout the community can really be an example to other communities, because we haven't seen, some of the issues that we've talked about behind the scenes like we have in some of the other communities. So thank you for pushing forward on the social programs and working with everybody.
Thank you, and I'll reiterate that we're blessed to have the staff that we do. Our focus is legitimacy and being involved in the community. So it's a mindset that's out there. Our mission, vision, and value statements to help people. 3 words, and that's, everyone knows that, and you see that when they do it in the field.
Thank you, Mr. Ricker, and then did I see your hand, Ms. Bryant? Well, then you bought
Yeah.
what's behind door number 2, then, Mr. Ricker.
I just, not to be a broken record, but I've always appreciated your view on the mental health role of the jail and focusing on that and the reentry program, because those are two really key elements to help the people to be that part. And I think that's something as a county we need to rally around and make sure that we support that. And I know with the budget challenge, the mental health part of it has been a push for you. It's a hard one. And so I guess I'd ask, we consider that as we look forward to helping the sheriff's department and the jail system work on the mental health and work on that reentry program. So ultimately, the people that come back out into the entry side have opportunities, have that coaching. And I think Angel Cruz was a perfect hire for that role. But I really like to acknowledge that. And then the last piece is to acknowledge not only your role, but all of your staff, your officers, everybody working, because they're putting a lot of hours. They're away from their families. We're taxing the heck out of your team. And so I want you to know that we do appreciate and make sure that they understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I add to that, Steve, I'd like to thank the family members of our team. I mean, they're going through a lot right now. I've literally, I know my wife's probably watching it, I've had 2 days off since March. 2 days that I haven't been to the office, and usually it's 14 to 18 hours a day. So they're going through a lot too, and I'm not the only one out there doing that. So it's our time to step up. We know that, and everyone's done that thus far.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Mr. Ricker. Did I need to thank you, Brandy?
Okay. When I first got on the county board, one of the first places I visited was the Peoria County Jail. And I did a tour, and I was able to see how the population was lower than it had been in the past. I remember when the jails were overcrowded, and Rhonda Guyton explained to me all the programs that Sheriff Asbell has implemented, and it shows his dedication and his to being innovative and doing what other areas are not doing. So I commend him for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Dillon.
Sheriff, since we're saying thanks, I always, Peoria County is really lucky to have Sheriff and his management team, from Rhonda, Chris, James Middlemiss, Doug. I mean, the things that you see, I live in a community that they're out every day. And an example yesterday is there was a lemonade stand. Twice, 2 different officers that were through the community stopped, took pictures with all the kids out there, and those kids thought that was the greatest thing that they ever seen there. And there's not a community event that it's in my district, that you don't see the sheriff or one of his management teams, and usually it's the sheriff and multiple of them show up. In West Peoria alone, they have the community officer. You see him all the time. And he's talking about programs that he's been implementing through conversations with Jahan and other people in criminal justice reform. He's been doing it longer than people now. They're just start talking about it. So, yeah, things aren't perfect here and they can get better, but I'm really proud that we have people like Sheriff Asbell here and Jody and other people that are leading the way, and Chairman. It's a tough conversation, but it needs to be had, and I think the sheriff's never shied away from any tough conversation and wants to be at the forefront and making sure everything is done. So I do appreciate it, and I don't get to say it enough, and it's not, when you have a good leader and you see the leadership going that, it's way easier for people to see underneath. And they have a great team, and it's just not the sheriff. I know his team works countless hours too, but from this member, I appreciate everything that you do, and I know it's not easy on your family life of 7 days a week and being at West Peoria jamborees and other events and passing out hot dogs and doing everything that you do. So I appreciate it, and I know that you put in way more hours than what people realize.
Thank you. This is better than having a roast. I mean, I'm actually getting good stuff tonight.
I don't want to keep you. We're still under miscellaneous. I'll start here in the back looking at Miss Daly. Are you good? Miss Duncan, Miss Pastucia.
I just wanted to say thank you for the proclamation, because I want the public to know that Black Lives Matter to Peoria County, Black Lives Matter to me, and I just want to say that, we're not just acknowledging the protests, we're talking about how to do things better. So, thank you.
Thank you, Miss Pastucia. The pain and discomfort everybody is experiencing in their own unique ways is a groundswell, I think was a word I saw Scott use in a document recently. So, thank you. Anyone else? We're under miscellaneous. All right, Junior. So, we don't have an executive session, which I'm sure is to the delight of everyone here, but I'm not certain if tonight is the last night that we're going to be working directly with Mr. Evans. Is that true? Yeah, it's true. So,
Yes.
So we all could say a lot of stuff, but I'd like to reintroduce again before we say thank you to Larry, the new chief of civil, who's not exactly new. We've met her a couple times. Would you stand and just say hi from Phil's mic there? And if you take your mask down, we'll remember a little more. Look, that's the new civil chief that State's Attorney Hoos has recruited.
Thank you. My name is Jenny Boswell, and yes, I'm the new civil chief in the state's attorney's office, and I look forward to working with all of you. And because you're all wearing masks, I might not recognize you in the hallway, so please say hello, and I'm happy to be on board.
Thank you and welcome. Larry, so what are you going to say?
I would just like to thank the board. People have asked me where I'm going. I'm going nowhere. I'm going to just be doing felony work back what I started, which is what I've done through just about all my career, trial work. So that's what I'll be doing full-time in the office. But I told Jenny I'll still be here, and if she has any questions, she certainly knows where I'm at. Like I told the chairman tonight, I've been training her on how to read the issues related to executive session minutes so she can read them as well as I do when she's asked to do that. But I just like to thank everybody. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed working on all the issues the county has. And Jenny realizes already that there's so many disparate parts of the county, different agencies, different personnel, with many different problems, legal problems that are brought to our office on a daily basis. And it's a position that's very rewarding, it's challenging, and it's certainly, I was always able to contact department heads, elected officials, people within the different agencies to answer questions and help me. So I really appreciate that. So thank you again.
We've certainly enjoyed having you. Does anybody have any comments about how much we're going to miss them, or will we wait until we're all able to come back in the building and Powell in his office across the courthouse there and bring him something he's not allowed to eat? Is that fair enough, Larry? Okay, and State's Attorney Hoos, I'm looking forward to working with your new team, and by all means, one of the things that I don't know yet, because I haven't really worked with Jenny, but when Larry says, what do you want me to say, Mr. Chairman. It just means you can't do that. Okay, so that's just to get me off the topic. Let me say. So, okay, he doesn't make the law; he just tells it. We're going to have our special meeting Tuesday. We've noticed it up for 3 p.m.
3:30.
3:30 p.m.
Budget committee is at 3 p.m. Board meeting is at 3:30. Both will be via WebEx, so everyone will get a WebEx invitation tomorrow.
All right, and that will be to discuss budget amendments related to public safety and elections. Okay? Seeing nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. Don't let your guard down. Last two proclamations, one was related to the code of emergency. You did mean to vote no? Okay. Sometimes when you don't know, vote you didn't